That's why I just can't stand Kevin Durant as a basketball player, as a person, anything with it. All right. That's for you, Jade. All right, so here we go. Continuing on, you guys are going to add to this. We are going to sneak this in as a definition. Lipids. Lipids. And I'm going to sneak it in here. Okay, when we define this and when your book defines these, and I don't believe, it did define it. I don't love the definitions, though. So, lipids were you two, right? Bam Bam and Andrew?
No.
You guys were lipids?
Wow.
I don't know why. I even showed you the protein part of my notes. Okay, from your notes, gentlemen, what's a lipid?
Fats.
Ooh, they're fats. So, I'm going to sneak this in a little bit more specific. Don't change yours.
Wait, what?
Wait a second.
You erased it?
Yeah.
Do you already have lipids?
Yeah, we do.
I erased it all.
Why did you have lipids? Weren't you protein?
No, me.
Oh, it's you two together. That's where I'm getting goofed up. It's just due to where you sit. All right. Why'd you erase it?
Okay.
Okay. Got me good. Cool. Lipids, at the most basic, they're fats. Now, there's other ways that they can be represented. What are they made of, first of all? Mostly made of something.
Carbon and hydrogen.
Yeah.
Mostly carbon, C, and hydrogen. Now, that's all your book says. It says they're molecules that are made of these. That's it. Now, I don't think that's quite enough for it. Mostly carbon and hydrogen, that's what they're made of. I'm cool with that. Now, specifically, these carbon and hydrogen bonds that form and create lipids, they make things in our bodies, which form, and there's two things. And you guys have given me one, and I'm going to write this as a colon in mine. You might not have. Fats
Oil.
and oils
And waxes.
And waxes.
and waxes. Thank you. What's the difference between a fat and an oil and a wax?
Fat is room temperature.
Okay, so what at room temperature?
Uh,
Solid. They're solid at room temperature. Solid at, and I can write room temperature, but this is, you're going to see this all over science. In my mind, when I first heard it, I thought, well, it depends on the room. Right? Room temperature of somebody, like, it doesn't though. The generally accepted 20 degrees Celsius, 68 Fahrenheit. That's pretty common around the world. I'm going to say 20 Celsius. Okay. Where would you find a fat that's solid at 20 Celsius?
In your stomach.
Yeah, you can find it in your gut, definitely. On a steak that you're about to cook. A chicken meat is really common to have fat in it. It makes the fat taste good. Okay, where would you find, what would liquid be at room, what? Weird. What would oil be at room temperature? Liquid. Okay. Now, liquid at 20 degrees Celsius. And your notes are going to look a little bit differently than this, but these have a special name. Now, without going into the chemistry of it, glycerol is something that you're going to find in your body. Okay, it's going to happen. It exists. We're just going to accept that, I think. Turns out that sometimes we get 3 different glycerol molecules that stick to the carbon and hydrogen chain that we have. If there's 3 of them, what's that prefix? A 3-gon is a special shape.
I got it. Oops.
Give me the name of a 3-sided polygon. You don't need to look.
No.
It's a triangle because tri means 3. If you have fats and oils, these are just different variations of what we call triglycerides. Okay. 3 of them. Those are 2 variations of triglycerides. 2 of them, sorry. Triglycerides are that are fats are solid. Triglycerides that are oils are liquid. Okay, what's a wax?
That one. I don't know.
Okay, so it kind of splits the difference, right?
Yeah.
It depends. I wouldn't say like butter. I know we don't think of it as a real wax, but butter's kind of waxy. It's not super solid, but it's also not liquid, right? It's somewhere in between. Okay, I'm just gonna not say anything about the wax, but I'm cool with that. Now, what do fats do in your body?
Energy give you energy.
They give you energy. Now, for this, if you ingest more stuff in your body, creates more energy than you can use, your body stores it. Which means lipids that we're already talking about, these get stored in fat cells?
Wax gets stored in fat cells.
So just lipids in general. Whether it's oils or wax or fats, triglycerides, whatever the case is,
That's like their primary function.
that is their primary function. Yes, there are some other functions of them as well that we'll get into, but cool. With that, there are other types of other types of lipids and fats that you're going to see, and especially if you follow like diet stuff or pay attention to nutrition, you're going to see these words constantly. We have a couple different types of lipids. So we've already looked at they can be fat or oil, whatever the case is. We're going to have a little subsection underneath of our lipids where we're just going to discuss saturated and unsaturated. So right off the bat, let's just jump in unsaturated. Now, the lipid group yesterday, I spoke to you, I think, about what it means to be saturated or unsaturated. Do you recall the example that I used?
Yeah, it was the hand thing.
So the hand thing was a good one, and we can do that if that helped. If I wanted to mix salt into water,
Oh yeah, that one.
could I do a little bit and dissolve it all in there?
Yeah.
Now, I could do a little bit more and maybe it still dissolves. Is there a point where no more salt will dissolve in that water? Because there's just literally no more places for that salt to join onto with the water, right? Once that happens, you have full saturation. Okay, that's what it means. If it's unsaturated, it means it could take more salt. Or, yeah, it could just take salt. Now, that happens in a lot of different places. In the air right now, there's moisture, obviously. There's some moisture, the air holds it, that's fine. When it gets to the point where it can't hold any more moisture in the air, what happens with the weather? It rains, right? Because it's oversaturated and it starts to fall out because it can't hold any more moisture. The same thing happens with fats and lipids specifically. It's just on a different level. So I'm going to show you the picture, but I'm not going to... do we want to see the picture? We'll look at it here in a second. We're just going to make a comment here. If we have an unsaturated fat, these things will define what the shape of these lipids look like just as we're looking at them as a particular element. Unsaturated, all that this means is that more carbon or more atoms can connect. And I don't even care what sort of atom it is. If it's unsaturated, it means there's more space to take. Okay, more atoms can connect. And I'm going to be a little bit more specific to the tail end of a lipid molecule. So I'm going to simplify the picture that they have in the book because they use a bunch of different acids and they never specify what they are, which also bugs me, but I'm not the author. So check it out. I'm just going to use a bunch of dots here to represent atoms bonding, okay? So here we go. Looking at this, without going like crazy into the special bonds, we get this thing called stearic acid. And we're not even focusing on what it is, but let's say I have a bunch of carbons and hydrogens that join together where I have a bunch of carbons here, and then your picture can be lazier, much lazier than this. Let's say these are all carbon atoms that have formed in a chain because that's one thing that carbon can do. Okay, on these carbons, remember that carbon has how many handles to stick out and grab other stuff? 4. That's what makes carbon so special. Now, if we look at any of these in particular, like let's focus on just this very middle carbon atom.
Do we draw it?
You could draw a few little dots, yeah. And we're not going to go crazy with it. But if I look at just this one, and I'll point to it, you don't have to draw the white line. This one right here. How many atoms are stuck to it right now in this chain that I have the picture with?
5.
So careful. Just directly connected to this.
1.
I see one here. Is there another one connected here?
3.
Where's your third?
Up.
Are you looking up here?
Yeah.
Is it connected to this carbon though?
Oh.
Like there's only 2, right?
Yeah.
There's a carbon stuck on either end to make my chain. Now, which means there's 2 more places for something to join on, right? In this situation, and this is a particular type of acid, what we get is hydrogens, because they're made of carbons and hydrogens. The hydrogens join on here on the sides. There's 2 more handles, hydrogens can join. Okay, now, when we get up to the tail end, we're typically going to introduce something else. This is our lipid that we see right now, just made of a bunch of carbons and hydrogens in a chain. This is a lipid. Now, when we get up to the very top, whether it's the tail or the head, doesn't matter. Let's say that we introduce, just for now, a new atom. So something else that joins to make this a different lipid. It's starting to look like a caterpillar. Thank you. I was not going to find that word. Okay, so hypothetically, we have this picture, and whatever this atom is, let's say it can take another hydrogen here. That red dot on the top left can take a hydrogen. Cool. Since these are the same element, using red, if this one had a spot to grab onto one more, does this one also probably have a spot to grab on?
Yes.
However, right now, is it connected?
Yes.
Like, do I have another one here?
No.
So this is unsaturated. It could accept more stuff. This is what we call an unsaturated fat or an unsaturated lipid. It has impacts on the chemical level that vary, like huge impacts, different impacts on health, but this is what they're talking about. The picture that they use in the text, pretty similar, more complex than this, and I'm not going to draw the next one, but let's just take a look. That's not what I'm trying to take a look at. Okay, here is the stearic acid that we just drew, right here, and it'll focus. Okay, bunch of carbons, hydrogens connected, and then up at the end, we have a hydrogen connected here, but this one's not yet. Unsaturated. Okay, now, in this one, it's hard to tell because I don't love the picture that they use, but is it possible that with a different atom, maybe this thing, instead of having an extra space, has a double bond? And what I mean by that is, hypothetically, let's say that this thing here had a double bond and it was connected twice. Is it possible that this one could take more, or it's been double bonded here for whatever chemical reason? And then now it looks like it wants more, but it can't take anymore. Like, that could happen, and we can't see them directly. In that case, if you couldn't take any more, what do you think we would call it? Saturated. Unsaturated means you could have more space. Saturated means there's no more space. So here we go. We'll just define that real quick. We have unsaturated and saturated lipids. Saturated, no room to accept more. No more room at tail for more atoms. Now, in my mind, again, I just want to stress, I really want to dig into this, and when I see this, like, I can accept this as fact, but the why question is what really goes to me. That is not our focus. The why would be the focus of a really in-depth organic chemistry course, not ours. Okay. Now, any others? Lipid people. We have saturated and unsaturated. Phospholipids. Now, when you see phospho, any element come to mind? Phosphorus. So we get these lovely things. We get saturated, unsaturated lipids, but we also get phospholipids. Phospholipids, which, again, I'm not going to draw the picture, but I can show it, or you can see it in the book. And I lied, I'll just show it in the book. A phospholipid is just a lipid, that long tail, that chain of carbon and hydrogens, that maybe at the end, just due to chemistry, we get these lipids here, these chains down here are lipids, and then we get some new sort of thing that connects to it that's called a phosphate. Don't care what a phosphate is right now. We're just going to say, hey, a phosphate can join on these, and this is called a phospholipid. Now, without going into the chemistry, it would be silly to mention it without saying anything else about it. For phospholipids, can either of you guys tell me what phospholipids do for us? It's a type of fat, but it's super important. Say it again. Bone is that's a guess, I take it, right? It's a good guess. Do you have a reason to guessing it, or was it just thrown out?
Because like fats for our bones, like just in general, like have healthy bones.
Yeah, you definitely need fats to have like a well-balanced diet. I agree with you. These are even smaller member though. What's the difference between, if I put oil and water together, what happens? They don't mix, right? So this is weird, but hypothetically, pretend that you were somewhere in private and you were able to like rub oil over your entire body. It's weird, but let's say you're completely oiled up. Okay, it's weird, but check this out. If you then were like oil everywhere, If you put your foot in the water, into like a thing of water, would your foot get wet from the water?
No.
Because what isn't the water going to be able to move past? The oil that's connected to you, right? Now, you're made of cells, right? And for your cells to function, they can't just let water in and out freely. They have to do so in a balanced way. Did you catch that part?
What?
You're made of cells.
Oh, yeah,
Cells
yeah.
need water, and the amount of water in them impacts how they operate. Which means we need a way to be able to prevent water from freely entering and leaving all of our cells in our body. What do you think we might use to prevent water from moving between in and out of our cells? Oil or lipids more in general. So phospholipids, I'll get you in just a second, Andrew. Phospholipids are just that. We know that the chemistry behind it isn't our focus. However, what we do care about is because all lipids are hydrophobic. What is phobia?
You hate something.
It's not hate, fear. Okay, if something's hydrophobic, what does it do?
So lipids are alive.
I mean, scared of water.
They're not a literal fear. And we'll look at this here in a second. But fear, that's a common thing that we do. They don't have feelings, I don't think. However, these things, phospholipids in specific, they structure and function in cell membranes. Now, specifically, that weird oiled up and jump in a pool example is exactly what I'm referring to here. Because if you're a cell and you have lipids in your membrane, the outside, water can't get in and out without you opening the door for it, right? Like without, in the body example, unless you clean a bit of oil, your water is not going to touch your skin.
But if people like oil in your nose, can you breathe underwater?
No, you would just drown in oil.
Oh.
We know water and oil don't mix, and the fact that the outside of your cells are made of phospholipids or lipids in general means that water can't just freely get in unless the cell opens up to somehow allow it in.
Don't we make our like own body oils?
On the outside, we do, absolutely, but inside of you, you have phospholipids, which are gained from fat that you ingest in your body, puts it there. Okay, real quickly, just so you can see something hydrophobic. And we're going to go ahead and just go to YouTube for this. Control all YouTube. Okay. When I think of hydrophobic, there's some like crazy sand stuff that I think of, but there's others. Rain jackets, yeah. So let's see, hydrophilic and hydrophobic. We'll just check. Here's a hydrophobic blade, which means it's a blade that the blade isn't afraid of water, right? But water won't connect to it. It will not bond with it in any way. So here it is. It's sitting on a surface that's hydrophobic. You see it's just sliding around. They've coated this knife with something hydrophobic. They can cut water. There's a regular knife. Surface tension acts. A hydrophobic knife prevents it from grabbing on anywhere. Like,
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
this is hydrophobic. It's fear of water, but it's not literally afraid. It just doesn't combine with water.
There's this one plant that it's in the Philippines. It's like hydrophobic, and if you rub, it's like so like there's like juice inside of it. When you like rip it apart, you rub it. There's like water.
The same thing happens with that. Cool. Super cool. Lots of plants have hydrophobic stuff. Like you've seen water beat up and dew beat up on a leaf.
Yeah.
That's because that water's sticking to itself because it can't stick to the plant. Lots of plants have waxy leaves. They're lipids. Okay, one other place, steroids. And just to be real clear, because everybody wants to think of it this way, we're not talking like getting jacked steroids. Lots of medicines that people take are steroids. I, for example, when I was younger, I had really bad asthma. I still have asthma, I think. I don't know, I don't have to treat it at all. But one of the things that they give people with asthma is steroids. Now, they're not get jacked steroids. Steroids are just there to help your body produce stuff. So in the case of asthma, your body produces way too much histamine and it causes inflammation in your lungs. Like you start to wheeze because your lungs build up, right?
So targeting like muscle, it targets like
Cellular function
Oh,
is an easier, just broad sense. So some of them might target muscles, and those are anabolic steroids is what those are called if you want to get jacked and undergo all those negative side effects. But steroids, for our purposes, we're going to think of them much more broad than just getting swole. Okay, steroids. These things, and I'm trying to think of the easiest way to go through it. What did you guys say about steroids?
Steroids include substances such as cholesterol and hormones.
So cholesterol is a form of a steroid that, if you guys haven't had to deal with it yet, but as you get older, you get more cholesterol in your blood, and there's good and bad cholesterol, but it comes from lipids. The more fat you eat, the higher cholesterol your blood is, and eventually it might lead to blockages and heart attacks and things like that. However, cholesterol is just one example of steroids in your bodies. What makes, and I don't know if you guys know this, what's the difference in hormones between you and female counterparts? Like, what hormone is responsible for male? So you're close. Testosterone. Testosterone produces more masculine qualities. Now, don't get me wrong, women have testosterone as well, just way less than men. We have the female hormone, the more common female hormone. Do you know what it is?
Dopamine.
Not dopamine. We all have dopamine as long as we're all happy sometimes. Estrogen is another one. Now, there are a lot of hormones out there. They're lipids. They're like intake of fat helps your body produce these steroids and hormones and things like that. Cool. All right. Anything else that you would like me to add about lipids, lipid group?
Necessary lipids such as vitamin D.
Vitamin D. Okay. So I'm fine with that. In the same way, I'm not going to write it down, but you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Vitamin D production. If you're starving to death, you're not going to be able to produce vitamin D because your body can't put energy there when it's trying to keep from dying, right? Like, it prioritizes things. Vitamin D production, also part of this. Cool. All right. They're all kind of chainy looking things like this. It just depends on what's on the end. Cool. Proteins.
So you can guess.
What I can guess?
Yeah, for who got proteins.
Time. Nucleic acid. Carbs. Fred, you did lipids.
Oh,
Son of a gun. It was RJ and Bam Bam that just did lipids. Okay. Andrew and Fred, you're going to hook it up. We talking proteins. Now, I think that this is the biggest group of them all. By a lot. By a lot. Okay. You're going to add stuff then. And I'm going to pull from you just at the beginning. Okay. First and foremost, proteins. How would you define them? How did you define them in your notes? Not your head, I want your notes.
A compound made up of small carbon compounds called amino acids.
Okay, I'm good with that. Made up of small carbon compounds, which these are just molecules, little things with carbon in them. Small carbon compounds. And they have a specific name. I'm going to put this in parentheses. They're known as amino acids. And this, I'm not going to define it right here, but I'm going to make it caps because it's so important. Okay, they're made of these small carbon compounds called amino acids. Now, what is in these compounds? Did you have that part?
No.
Okay, so commonly your proteins which are made of amino acids are going to be like 6 different elements. That's it. We get carbon, obviously, since we're talking about carbon compounds. Do you guys remember any of the other important things that's in your body? Any of the important elements? Hit it.
Sulfur.
Oxygen is one of them. Sulfur is one of them. And this one, I'm just going to say sometimes sulfur shows up in these amino acids. Not always. Hydrogen's another super important one. Nitrogen. Nice. Did you have that in your notes, or is that off of memory? You are killing it, Fred. Nice work. Okay. These are the common elements that you'll find. And if, again, you were an organic chemist, you would go into why these and how do they connect specifically. We're more concerned about the broader picture. Okay. Awesome. Now, for the structure of these, did you guys address the structure of proteins whatsoever?
structure.
Like, how are they made? What do they look like if we could look at them?
No, we only I did the amino acid peptide bonds.
Okay, so that's another word. Peptide bond is fine and dandy. I can accept it, but they never go into why is it called this? What is a peptide bond? They just mention it. They say it is. So you're going to add some stuff here then. Typically, when we're looking at these, they're carbon compounds, right? Okay, so as we deal with carbon compounds, we're just going to say that our basic structure is as follows. Central carbon atom. Now, we are going to look at amino acids because if you put a bunch of amino acids together, you get what's called a protein. So we're really focusing on what are the smaller pieces made of. Like a house is made of walls and floors, but those are made of bricks. It's the same thing. Stuff is made of proteins, but the proteins are made of amino acids. Okay, so for this, there's a central carbon atom with, and we're going to pause right here. If I'm a carbon, how many hands, quote unquote, am I going to stick out to join and bond with other stuff? Four. Okay, which means we have a carbon, and we're going to draw this here in a second, but we need 4 things to connect to it. Okay, one of these, we're going to just say with, and I'm going to write it like this. 1 bond with hydrogen. So there's 3 left, right? We had carbon, and 1 arm grabbed hydrogen. Cool. Beyond this, 1 is formed with an amino group, 1 bond, and again, this is something that I would like to know more and dig in deeper, but we're not organic chemists. An amino group, which, remember we're talking about amino acids, so here's the namesake. Okay, not always the case, but an example, just so you guys have it, and I will not test you on this, but it's nice to have. Amino groups, commonly hydrogen, nitrogen. Okay, so right now, here I am carbon. I'm holding a hydrogen here. I'm holding an amino group here, which we'll look at here in a second. How many more things can I grab?
2.
I can grab 2 more things. One of these is going to be what's called a carboxyl group. 1 bond with a carboxyl group. And when we use this word group, just so you guys know, these are just different molecules. So just a different piece that sticks to it. Okay, if you want it, carboxyls often look like this. It looks like it says Cu, kind of. This is carbon monoxide, CO. And then OH, whether you remember it or not, it's called a hydroxide. So I can see the oxyl part of this. And there's carbon in there too, so carboxyl.
Oh, okay. I thought that was the one at the end.
Oh, good call. Okay, how many grabs have we made?
3.
3. There's one more, right? Okay, so all your amino acids will have a hydrogen. They'll have an amino group that has hydrogen, nitrogen. They'll have a carboxyl group that has a hydroxide and carbon and oxygen. And then this last one is where they get crazy. 1 bond with a variable group, which means it changes. That's all that we mean by variable. Okay, when you're looking at these are referred to as R. Now, I'm going to sneak ahead, and I don't know if you guys have this. In our bodies, there's no Y to this for us, but how many variations exist for that last R group? Did you catch that in your notes, protein guys?
No.
Okay.
Write that down.
So that's all right. Check it out. There are 20 possible R groups.
Oh, is there 21? I remember like a big number.
So we'll get to a big number here in a second. But there are 20 variations in the human body for which this variable group can take. 20 different things. Okay. Now, it is entirely up to you if you want to draw this, but check it out. When we look at the structure of proteins, they get wild. And in fact, I would say don't draw this, but it's nice to see it. What's at the center of a protein? What's the central atom in a protein?
Glucose.
Don't guess.
Amino.
Carbon.
Carbon. Carbon's the center. So check it out. If I want to draw a very, very basic amino acid, which is a part of a carbon or a part of a protein, there's a carbon in the middle. We get one group that is hydrogen. Cool. One arm that reaches out and grabs your amino group, which I'm just making this up. We'll say it's that one for now. Okay. One that grabs what?
Hydrogen.
Already got it. Here's hydrogen and here's my amino.
The R.
The R, I'm fine with that. Here's that 20 different options. And then over here, there's one more. It's our carboxyl. So COOH. Now, when you're looking at them, the pictures, like, they go into it a bit more, but this is the basic structure of a singular amino acid. Okay, this is it. 20 variations. Now, here's where these get big. This is an amino acid. Okay, Are you guys going to draw it? Okay. If you have it drawn, here's where it gets crazy, which means if there's 20 possible choices for R, there's 20 different amino acids, right? Because you could have it with one variable or a second or a third or a fourth. There's 20 of them. Okay, 20 amino acids. Now, here's the crazy thing. Proteins, and this is just a follow-up statement. Proteins are made of what, did we say? So you're going too far. Houses are made of walls, and walls are made of bricks. Proteins are made of what? A bunch of things put together.
Cells.
Proteins are made up of small carbon compounds,
Atom.
amino acids. So here's where these numbers are going to start getting really, really big. Okay, for this, there are way more carboxyls than just this example. There's a bunch of carboxyl elements and compounds that you could form, which I don't have the number, but hypothetically, 20 choices for this one. And I'm just going to make up numbers, but we can check them if you're interested. Let's say there's 20 choices here, and 100 and 100, or one is a hydrogen, right? Let's say each of these have 50 choices. How many different amino acids could you make if there's 20 ways to change this and 50 and 50? You're not going to get the number. Can we just agree it's huge?
Yeah.
Like, it's gigantic, right? Okay, for this, proteins, and I'm going to do this real quick. One amino acid, just so that we don't lose the connection. This is an example of a singular amino acid. Okay, when we talk about having an actual protein, it's made of amino acids. However, specifically, proteins are made of 20 combined or bonded amino acids. Now, just to think about the insanity of how big this number is. If we'd had, I'm just going to make up a big number because it's probably pretty close. Let's say we had 10 million possible combinations that could happen here to form a single amino acid. And now you have 10 million choices for the first amino acid and 10 million choices for the second and third and fourth. For all 20 of them, that is an ridiculously big number. What's a million to the power of 20? A lot. Like a million times a million times a million. You're already at a trillion after the first two of them.
Wait, what is the power of? What is that?
Multiply it by itself that many times.
Oh.
So what's a million times a million times a million times a million times a million? 20 times.
It's like 20.
Nope, that's 20 times a
Oh.
million. What's a million times a million?
Like 20.
It's a trillion.
Trillion?
A trillion. A million millions is a trillion.
And
A
that's
million
not a
trillions
cell.
is a quadrillion. A million quadrillions is a heptillion. Like, these numbers are ridiculously large. Like,
What's
way
the-
bigger than we can fathom.
What's the highest we go up to that's like really that like we made up like past a trillion with before infinity?
A Google is the biggest number that's commonly referenced.
A Google?
A Google.
What
10 to the power of 100.
Oh.
But we deal with numbers way bigger than that. Like, they never
what
stop.
What are the scientific not like the names of them, like the higher we go, like
That is, I only know a few of them.
only
Just,
like,
yeah. But check this out.
Canadian.
When we have these, like, there's a ton of combinations. This is our ending statement. The bonds, and I'm just going to say this one, and I lied, will define this. If we need to stick 20 amino acids together to get a singular protein, turns out that we have a definition of this. We're going to define for it, without going into the chemical detail, what is known as a peptide bond. And rather than what it is, I'm more concerned with what it does. A peptide bond is what sticks amino acids together. So if you have 20 amino acids that you have to stick together, then you need peptide bonds holding each one to the next. Okay, these hold amino acids together. Amino acids together. And specifically, how many amino acids together to make a protein?
One.
Not one.
Oh, 20.
20. There's 20 amino acids. They hold amino acids together, all 20 of them, to make proteins. Now, at the start of class tomorrow, we will finish this. I'm just going to spoil it a little bit. The function of a protein, everything. Like, proteins are so important in every thought that we put into life. We'll cover this more tomorrow, where we'll knock out our proteins. along with special acids that maybe you'll be able to tell us a little bit more about. Cool.